It began with a few dozen boxes left behind after the death of her father.
I confronted them because they'd been in my basement for a decade already, and so I wanted to see what was in there.
That's MacArthur Genius Award winner Dorothy Roberts, an African-American woman known for her scholarship around race, gender, and the law. Her father, Robert Roberts, was a white anthropologist from Chicago who spent much of his life steeped in a research project.
He believed that Black and white people marrying each other was the best path to dismantling white supremacy and what he called the racial caste system in Chicago and in the United States.
Dorothy Roberts' new memoir is The Mixed Marriage Project, in which she chronicles the discovery of more than an unfinished manuscript. I started by asking her if she had a sense of what she would find when she finally dove into those boxes.
I knew there would just be a lot of research, but it was a complete shock to me to find out that there was 100 years of marriages in these interviews. But even more shocking was that I'd always thought that he got interested in interracial marriage, especially Black-white couples, when he met my Black mother. So this really flipped my whole conception of their relationship. So the question for me was, why did he get interested in this topic? And did he get interested in my mother because of his obsession with interracial marriage?
Did you feel a sense of, I don't know, is it betrayal too strong of a word? I mean, did you feel in a way that you were part of his research?
Yeah, well, of course, that question then extended to me. So it was not just a question of how my mother fit into his research project, but also how I and my sisters fit into it. You know, there was this belief that children born to mixed-race couples would have psychological, social, even biological problems because they didn't fit into one group or the other. And he wanted to disprove that. And so when I found out that he had started these interviews and gone on this mission prior to creating, our family, and then later discovering a file he kept on me, it did raise the question, well, am I part of his research experiment to prove that children like me would be well-adjusted?
Sort of threaded through the book is your own inquiry, but it's also his notes from the interviews that he did with interracial couples. Would you talk about some of those interviews? Because some of them are kind of painful to read, frankly.
Oh, yes.
Some of the attitudes that some of the partners had about each other.
I had so many feelings about these fascinating interviews. So there were stories of courage and deep love and commitment, but also many of these couples still held, in my opinion, very racist beliefs. For example, my father discovers a club called the Manasseh Society where he'd hoped to find mixed-race couples to interview. And he discovers that most of the couples consist of white women and Black husbands. And when he inquires about what happened to the Black women married to white men, one white wife says very bluntly, the Manasseh Society women don't like colored women. And why don't they like colored women? Because they believe colored women have loose morals and they don't demand that white men marry them.
Professor Roberts, those are some really painful stories. But you also say in the book that there was a point at which you didn't want people to know that you had a white father. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, that's true. Something I regret now, especially after reading the file that my father had on me and thinking back on how much he contributed to my identity. But it happened when I was in college. I joined a group of Black students who were very, very close to each other, just a dazzling, brilliant group of students. And I didn't want them to know that I had a white father. I thought that somehow that might interfere with my connection to them. I now feel that it probably wouldn't have made a difference, but I didn't want to take that risk. And I thought a lot about that in writing my memoir, just memories of how close we were, how much he respected my opinion, and then accepted when I disagreed with him. And so I did come to realize how important his lessons about human equality, the way he was so dedicated to his research, his mission to challenge the racial caste system, all of those lessons and my upbringing carried with me to this day.
You've had a very distinguished career in the academy. You've written seminal works like Killing the Black Body, which many people may know. So how did this deep dive into your parents' lives cause you to reflect on your own work?
I still don't believe that interracial intimacy is by itself is the answer, but I do think that we have to start with ourselves in our most intimate relationships when we think about how we are going to create a world that, a future in which racial hierarchy is unimaginable. And I also came to realize that even though my work prior to this didn't touch on interracial intimacy or interracial love, that the deeper questions that my father was asking, they are questions that I've asked throughout my work as well. I think underlying it is the question of what will it take to love each other as equal human beings?
Dorothy Roberts is a sociologist and law professor at the University of Pennsylvania. Her latest book is The Mixed Marriage Project, a memoir of love, race, and family. Professor Roberts, thank you so much for talking with us.
Oh, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure. I appreciate it.
I know it is. She's biracial. She's a biracial girl.
A project is a temporary, unique endeavor with a defined beginning and end, undertaken to create a specific product, service, or result. It differs from ongoing, repetitive operations by having constrained time frames, budgets, and resources. Key characteristics include clear, specific goals, a temporary nature, and a focus on producing unique outcomes or original change. That is the definition for a project. Gus T. Renegade, context of white supremacy. The worthless Negro boy, you will hear how worthless today. Today's date, Thursday, February 26, 2026. So I have been told. I reckon this is broadcast 2 of 2 for the day because we still did our neutralizing workplace racism today. Every Thursday, 8 p.m. Well, we didn't do it at 8 today. We were at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific today because I knew I wanted to be at Elliott Bay Bookstore to hear Dorothy Roberts, 3-time guest on the context of white supremacy, 5 times in the C.O.W.S archives because she came to the University of Washington 2 times. In 2024, Gus T was in attendance for both events, was able to get a question in as well. She gave great information both times in person and in all of her visits here to the C.O.W.S over the years. In fact, if I went back, Dorothy Roberts, the C.O.W.S, we have done over 2,500 episodes in our 17 years of broadcasting. Dorothy Roberts is one of the first 50 programs and one of the first 50 guests that we had on the C.O.W.S, to put numbers on it. She came here February 26, 2026 for Negro History Month to Elliott Bay Bookstore to discuss her brand new book, and I mean brand new, just literally published days ago. You heard her on NPR days ago, really it might be about hours ago, really, discussing said book, The Mixed Marriage Project. You just heard the definition for a project, and that gets right to the crux of the matter. What is this here book all about? This here book is about a memoir, Dorothy Roberts, and we talked with Dorothy Roberts in 2010 when she came to chat with us about Shattered Bonds. We talked with her about her having a white parent and a non-white parent. You can go back and listen to the archives at the very beginning of that broadcast before we get to Shattered Bonds. This book is about her white father, Robert Roberts, who is a white anthropologist, and he has a so-called project where he has been talking to so-called interracial couples. Mr. Fuller says not to use that term. White person in a sexual arrangement with a black person. He's been going and talking to them and asking them all these questions for decades. Okay, that's what this is investigating. As you heard, Dorothy Roberts finding this box of all of his papers about all these questions and what he's been doing with all of this so-called interracial sex for all of these decades, and her going through it and making it into a book. That's what all of this is about. I found out about this book at the beginning of the month when the book first came out, and I've been reading it for about the past 2 weeks. In fact, I started reading it once I became aware that she was going to be at Elliott Bay Books. That's, I think, how I first became aware that this book was coming out for Black History Month, and then she was going to be here in Seattle. I said, oh, okay, well, I'll go ahead and read it. Project. This book is not about a project. This book isn't even a project. What is it? It is the new, undisputed worst book ever. And you can check my record. What my man say? We had him on the program, Race Soldier, way back in 2022. But I said this before today. My questions and thought process about even going to hear Dorothy Roberts was heavily influenced by the fact that I had finished this book cover to cover, heavily highlighted, and had already concluded. Like I said, you can check my record. You can see I had been posting on social media about this book for about 2 weeks in shock and horror with every page, every paragraph, and saying, I cannot believe the scholar, Dorothy Roberts' scholarship raised me. That is literally, you can see that in the cap. I have literally written reports about white supremacy, racism, and quoted Dorothy Roberts. We were talking about all kinds of subject matter, crack babies, and I quote Dorothy Roberts. We talk about sickle cell anemia and people saying that that's just the black people's disease. I quote Dorothy Roberts. All kinds of things. And to read this book, it has been a shocking experience, but hey, Neely Fuller Jr., words, definitions take us where we need to go. I told you what's the name of the book, The Mixed Marriage Project. What is a project? A temporary, unique endeavor with a defined beginning and end, undertaken to create a specific product, service, or result. It differs from ongoing repetitive operations by having constrained time frames, budgets, resources. Key characteristics include clear, specific goals, a temporary nature, and a focus on producing unique outcomes or organizational change. That's a a project. Ain't no project to be found in this book. You just heard Dorothy Roberts tell them good folks at NPR 50 years, we ain't got no product. That already tells you we disqualified on 2 counts already, because this one, we temporary? Wait a minute. We supposed to be set time frame, not 5 decades, and we still ain't got no book. What this is pornography and racist peeping Tom, which is what I called it at Elliott Bay Books. But you'll get to hear the audio. Wow. And I can only say, I pre-visioned it, all of it, because I had said this book is lame, and I thought it would be a lot of white people there to be titillated by gutter sex and confusion about white supremacy racism, and it was that to some degree, but it was also a lot of non-white people victims of racism. You know, I hate talking to non-white people. I hate talking to non-white people. I am estranged from C.O.W.S listeners. Like, oh my God. Like, man, this event just clarified. I can even be specific, Brother Gus. What? I walked in early. I got there. They said doors open at 6:30. I walked in at 6:31. I put my bags down up front. I went to get a little fresh air, went to the restroom, washed my hands, freshen up, think of my questions, see if I can sneak in 3. I come back. Black people have arrived, and they are sitting around me. I'm going to tell you this. After what happened today, if I ever go to another public forum and I get to ask questions about white supremacy, racism, if there's any black people present, I'm sitting as far away from y'all as possible. If there's any non-white people present, I'm sitting as far away from y'all as possible. Like, we don't get along. We do not have the same views on the system of white supremacy, racism. That's supposed to be okay, but apparently it is not. I have to work with that too, no problem. I need super distance, and I'm so disgruntled because I had previsioned it. Man, I looked and I said, oh my goodness, the victims of racism are now sitting where I am. I need to move. And I was looking around and I saw empty space, and I was going to head yonder for the empty space. And I was delayed a few times because they had the projector. I would have had to kind of cut across the front. So I was delayed a few times. Plus I'd got like fresh produce, strawberries and a few blueberries and such. I didn't want to move my produce, but either way, produce be damned. I'm not sitting near victims of white supremacy to discuss racism, white supremacy ever, 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 ever again. I need to be far from y'all. All that aside, man, oh man, you can go online and look and see what I had to say about this here book before we get into it. I plan to write a review about this book because it's so bad. Since it's now the new worst book ever, it has bumped Alice Sebold, Lucky, down to 2. That means Isabel Wilkerson's case has been bumped to 3. It was so bad, like massive change with Gus T's literary groupings and such, because this book was so bad. What made this book so bad? One, we read Shar Adams' Black Owned, and talking about the white dominated publishing industry. One thing I've known about the publishing industry for years, white dominated publicists, they like to publish books about Negro History Month during February and late January, because you have Dr. King's holiday and then Black History Month, so they can have events like this and get black people to come out and buy a lame book that is not going to help us to replace white supremacy with justice. Long pattern of this. That's a topic for another day, but this is another installment in that line. That is a part of what makes it bad, is I think that there's a deliberate component. It was published right at the beginning of Black History Month, so they could suck up as much of that as possible and probably ride some of this into Women's History Month in March as well. But then we need the system of white supremacy, racism, Neely Fuller Jr. says, operates primarily by deception, more so than direct violence. Deception. We do not need people publishing books to lie to other victims of white supremacy. That is not what we do not need. We already got enough people confused. Gus T at the top of the list. We don't need no more confusion. There is no way anyone can look me in the face truthfully and tell me that this here book, the Mixed Marriage Project, that this here is about clearing up confusion for victims of white supremacy. You are lying to me, and that's one of the big things that I said about this here book. Man, it is so dishonest. It is so dishonest. That really is at the core of why is this the worst book of all time. It is so, and the dishonesty is right there. Really, the only thing I can say, if I had this to do over, maybe my one question should have been, how exactly do you qualify any of this as a project? And then let's get a definition for project. That would have been the one question. Or I can even give my own definition that I just read. You give me your definition for what a project is. This don't qualify in no way, shape, form. And that's how we get to the deception of all of this. What this is, her white dad went around peeping Tom. Put your binoculars on. Who you having sexual intercourse with? You cheating on your husband? What did he do? He went to the nudie beach. You say you lying, Gusty. No, black brother that I'm not sitting next to. He went to the nudie beach. Boobies out. Testicles hanging. Nudie beach. He went to watch pornography. Wait. He went to watch interracial pornography. And even I have to pause because all of that, shocking though it may be, the deception. I read this book as though we were reading this for the Catherine Massey Book Club. Like, I did more highlighting. I read this with the chat bot. And when I say I read it with the chat bot, I literally was copy and pasting almost every other paragraph because it was so repulsive and dishonest. And in my copying and pasting, frequently I wouldn't even add any commentary. I would just copy and paste. But in one of my copy and pastes, I copy and pasted that her white father, Peepin' Tom, he goes to this club to watch pornography, interracial so-called pornography, and he goes with not one but two black girls. You can even get double deception because one, we got legal scholar Dorothy Roberts. It's written in his notes that he took a black girl. For Sally Hemings, you a reproductive scholar, you say you a feminist. You gonna tell me you don't think this could have been a 15-year-old, 14-year-old, 12-year-old, Jeffrey Epstein? Hell yeah. Anyway, so you take two black girls to go watch pornography. The double whammy deception. I said Dorothy Roberts, a legal scholar. Damn right. I said Dorothy Roberts is a world-renowned legal scholar. That means you got to know pornography was illegal at this time. The bot had to tell me that. And the bot had to point out, man, the way that this pornography scene's set up, they got the black people doing all of the mischief of this pornography. So if this place gets raided, her white dad is a scholarly peeping Tom. He can do, whoa, I'm just doing research. I ain't doing that. It's the black people that they say, well, was she taking her clothes off and gyrating and, you know. And wait a minute, I ain't even tell it all. If you're going to tell it, you got to tell it all. If you're going to tell it, you got to tell it all. What time were they watching pornography? Because I'm going to tell you, I have heard of people doing counter-racist studies of pornography. I got the interviews. Can I give you the receipts, black brothers and sisters? Dr. Carolyn West, she came on the context of white supremacy. She is a scholar at the University of Washington. That's where she studied for a career. White supremacy and pornography. Came on this program and talked about her documentary. Let me tell you about black chicks. Got a spot in there where she talked about a pornography film. Interracial, they call it. It's a classic. Call it The Blacker the Berry. That's one. You know another counter-racist scholar that I know that studied pornography? The great Neely Fuller Jr. Got the public audio. He said he went to work, and I believe this would be at his government job. Went to work and would break out the Playboy pornographic magazine. Bam! He put his smut right out on the table, say, I'm studying white supremacy, all areas. Today is area 8. Bam! He said the co-workers would come and say, whoa, what's going on? I love Neely Fuller Jr. He said his co-workers would come out and say, whoa, what you doing? You done got the... Fuller said, I'm not going to hide nothing. I'm going to study it right here. I don't have nothing to hide. This is what I'm reviewing for the day. Area 8. ProduceJustice.com. Neely Fuller Jr. produced a book, didn't he? 3 of them, didn't he? Victim of Racism said he is greatly retarded. Didn't he say that? He wrote not 1, not 2, 3 books. 3 books. I digress. But I know people, they study pornography and white supremacy racism seriously. They do it under the light of day. Do you know what time Dorothy Roberts' white daddy went to study interracial pornography with black girls? 1 o'clock in the morning. Say, Gus T, what time did he leave? According to his own notes, he left at 5 in the morning. I said, damn, I can look at the dictionary. I said, don't they, they got that O word, orgy? Sing the hell, you, come on. Come on. That's what you're going to tell me is a project? Wait a minute. I thought if you do a project, we're going to do something scientific. This is rigorous. We trying to learn something, change something, prove something. You want people to replicate, come look at your work and see how you did all this. You ain't going to tell me you got no serious scientific project and your sister Dorothy Roberts done burned material because it was so embarrassing and humiliating to the family. I told you they went to the nudie beach. I said they went to the nudie beach. I said they was watching the interracial porn with the black girls at 5 in the morning. I said, man, when you go to the nudie beach, so is he nude at the nudie beach? And he got a pencil and a piece of paper, excuse the pun. He got the pad and he writing at the nudie beach? And then, what are you talking about at the nudie beach? She said, what are you talking about talking about what type of extramarital affairs do you have? That's what we're going to talk about at the nudie beach. What project? This ain't no project. This is pornography. Period. Now, even the other component of it is, if you do a serious study, everybody get to evaluate the work. Let us come and look at the records. We can't even do that. You're going to cherry pick Dorothy Roberts. You're going to cherry pick from 25 boxes collected over 50 years and give us a snippet here or there to tell us what's there. And like I said, some of the records been burned and tell us this is a project. Pornography from a racist peeping Tom going around ask all these invasive questions about sexual activity and how long you've been sleeping with niggers and how long you've been sleeping with white women and how many affairs you total peeping. And then sometimes he bring his white friends along. They anthropologists too. They got their nigger measuring instruments. Dorothy Roberts say, I'm glad that my daddy won't like them. They were his friends. We could stop right there, but beyond that, her daddy was the one that invited them with their bag of nigger measuring instruments. What do you mean? The dishonesty. See what I'm saying? There's so many layers of dishonesty in the text. In fact, I can even get more specific. I can get more specific in terms of the layers of deception in this text. This is in chapter 18, Seeking a Haven. Dorothy Roberts writes, I realize now that this whole time I have granted my parents a mercy I have denied to the interracial couples they studied. I have not examined the role race played in their marriage with the same scrutiny I have applied to interracial relationships more broadly. I have barely questioned the ethics of my father pursuing a romance with my mother when she was a student. My reluctance comes from knowing the depth of their love for each other and from my love for both of them. That is not acceptable, full stop. You are a legal scholar. You wrote Shattered Bonds. You wrote Killing the Black Body. You know the legacy of Sally Hemings, and forget all that. Me Too, Jeffrey Epstein, they have rules, and we talk about that all the time with no sex between white people and non-white people. They have rules against professors having sexual relations activity with their students for this very reason. Ethically, that don't look right. We don't want to encourage that sort of power dynamics. That's the same sort of thing we talk about all the time, right? Plus, her mother was not a U.S. citizen. She was a Jamaican native. The ICE people could be rounding her up right about now at that time period. All of that with fact, white man, black female, period, any time period, all of that in the, and to just cast all of that aside with the L word, that's what I mean. Like, oh no, this is not a project either, because there's a total breakdown, absence really of scientific rigor, and that's it right there, what you just heard. That's the integral relationship in this book, where she talks about how her mother, who is significantly younger than her dad, it's not a pedophile type thing, but I mean, we're children, but still, it's not a pedophile type thing, but her mom is younger than her dad and not a citizen and black female. Factor all that in the power dynamic, and he's a student. Factor all that in the power dynamic. But the she talks about their relationship as love, as opposed to investigating. Like, wait a minute, how did even all this happen? And her dad hooked up with her mom after he had already had, at this point, I think like 15 years approximately of doing his peeping Tom and all this collecting data, so-called pornography, and going to the nudie beat. He had been doing all of that for 15 years. And he even has a key moment where he's at, I think it's called the Manassa Club. I might be mispronouncing it, but it's in the book, where she talks about how her dad went to this club that's supposed to be so-called interracial. Most of it is black males with white women. And they say you can visit all you want to, talking to Dorothy Roberts' white dad, but you can't join the club unless you marry a black female. And he's like, oh man, no. And I was like, man, what's the big deal? You can go all you want. This, oh no, see, for me to really go and get my peep on, I can't be, because they would look at me and they might think the same thing. Hey, why is he coming to peep at us? Because it's a long tradition of that, slumming and all that, white people coming to look at black people dance and have sex and all the rest of it. Why is he coming to do this? For him to really be able to do this and not be an intruder, oh yeah, I got me a black gal too. And hey, I got a thing for the dark oaks, so it win-win. Anyway, but she does not interrogate all this. She just chalks it up as so-called love. And at the same time, she tells us that her mom, Iris, she comes over here. She is a PhD student. She's trying to get her degree so she can go out and do big things. Her white dad derails all of this. She gets pregnant and she ends up being a typist and doing all this labor for him while he's too shiftless and lazy to even publish a book. Plus, he doesn't do any of the domestic chores. She talks about this. Her mom does all of that. And she doesn't even get to expand her career. That's why I'm saying, like, to not interrogate any of that under, wow, the power dynamics of white supremacy, racism. You say you're supposed to be a feminist, black feminist? Dang. This book, in fact, one of my questions was going to be, given what this book shows, evidences about what I just said, her mom, Iris, she gets her whole PhD career sidetracked to help her racist white dad. He does not do the housework. She talks about that. Her mom does all the housework and chores and typing and all this to help him get his project together. She sacrifices he consumes all her time and energy. Given all of that, how is this book branded a tribute to your parents' love as opposed to an audit of racist, patriarchal consumption? That was going to be one of my questions. I didn't get to that one. Maybe I should have, but I had that on my list. Bam! I was ready to roll because I was going to get the C word consumption in for delectable Negro because that's exactly, and the food component was there too. Anyway, that was going to be one of my questions, but I could only get one in. Anyway, but I want you to hold that she refuses to interrogate. She refuses to be the legal scholar, scientist, attempted counter-racist that she's been for all the rest of her literature and academic career. She refuses to do that for her parents, and her white dad is a white anthropologist. I mean, that's like the bastion of pseudo-scientific racism, white supremacy, phrenology, and all the rest of it. But she refuses to interrogate this, even the student professor aspect of it. This is the way that she talks about a black male who apparently was her former piano teacher, and once he got to Chicago, found out he could have access to white women, so he starts exclusively dating white women, marries a white woman. She writes, this is in the chapter 15, Raising Children. She writes, my delight at possibly finding my childhood piano teacher evaporates instantly like a drop of water hitting a red-hot skillet. Mr. Sussex, that's the non-white male, spoke about dating white girls as if he had achieved a priceless trophy he always thought was beyond his reach, all the more precious for its unattainability. That meant that black girls turned unappealing by comparison, too ordinary to find attractive. The memory of the black high school boys leaning over the white 8th grade girls rushes into my head, extinguishing the sentimental feelings I had for the man who gave me piano lessons as a child. I try not to feel this way, but I can't help but take it as a personal insult, a slight against me and all the black girls whom men like him categorically deem unworthy of desire. Now, I mean, wow. I read this and I think, wait a minute, this is a non-white male who talked about being a victim of white supremacy in the middle of the 20th century. Could have been killed for being with a white woman, for all we know. No, and he was your piano instructor. He's been dead probably for some time. No sympathy, no empathy. He's not a victim of racism. Worthless Negro. Okay. How in the world is your peeping Tom dad? It's not even just that he is above scrutiny. He's not even just, I'm not going to interrogate. She presents him as a seditionist. He's a John Brown race traitor. What? He is too lazy to even publish in 50 years and a cash advance multiple times. He is too shiftless and lazy to publish a book. And I even emphasized this when I was going over it with the bot. I said he didn't publish anything because there is no project. It is just 50 years, 25 boxes of pornography. That's all. White people have a long history of titillation, some of it on display this Thursday evening, with talking, hearing about sexual intercourse, white people and non-white people, and particularly the way when you heard on NPR the journalist speaking with Dorothy Roberts, she says some of the interviews, the things that they say sound awful. She doesn't talk about the way that her dad talks. He focuses so much on the negroid features and the kinky hair, and it totally sounds like a peeping Tom race soldier who is obsessed. Oh, and she even uses that O word repeatedly. She uses it in the book, and she used it in the talk this evening. Obsessed with racism, white supremacy, and these racial classifications. What are the children going to look like? And are they going to have kinky hair? And all that sounded like Meghan Markle and all that. They got a book about that too, in white supremacy, racism in the UK that just came out. Anyway, so that's kind of what the book is about. The layers of deception in the book are so rampant, it would be difficult for me to get to them all. I can only, I guess, say briefly, when you hear the audio, we talk about being serious. It's Black History Month. Hey, Dr. Kamal Kamban, he's one among many. Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., he talked about the importance of being serious when it's time to discuss white supremacy, racism. I don't think I have ever, and I mean, it's a long history line. I mean, going back years of me going to different events, book clubs where you get to hear authors and things live in person. Frequently, I try to ask a question to model that, like to go out in person and to ask a question if possible. But it's a long history of me going to these type of events. I don't think I've ever attended an event that was about racism where there was so much laughing. I mean, literally, it was as if it's Black History Month. Did Moms Mabley come to Seattle? Did Red Fox come to Seattle? What is it? Richard Pryor come to Seattle? Like, what is going on? I mean, and you'll be able to hear. You will be able to hear now. Hey, I laugh, snicker. We are all human from time to time, but I mean, gosh, if we are talking about white supremacy, racism, it is not just, I mean, a lot of this is not funny. First, we're talking about a lazy peeping Tom race soldier. What is funny about that? I cannot emphasize enough even the fact is Negro History Month. And they had an image that hung up on the screen for a long time of she and her white dad, and he's got on a red, like, smoking lounge robe, and it's got these different so-called Asian iconography on the robe. Like, in my opinion, it's just total fetishization that I would expect from a white anthropologist. He can even say, hey, I traveled to this part of the world and I got this from, authentic Cambodian tribe and they made it for me in person, and, all the rest of it. But I mean, just anyway, but that picture was up, and this is a German white man. She had emphasized his German roots in the course of the book and the talk this evening. So that is our Negro History Month gift. A German white man who allegedly worked against racism by going to peep on black people and watch interracial pornography. Carter G. Woodson would be so proud. I said the black girl not being interrogated got project. I said I will not sit next to black people again. I did get the impression, in addition to all of the laughing, they did the, like if you're at the poetry events, at least old-timey that would be, they were doing the finger snap, and I was like, did we get a poet? I thought Dorothy Roberts was a legal scholar, and she wrote, like, Shattered Bonds and all. Like, why are we doing finger? Anyway, it was bizarre on that front, and then some of it I did prevision the anger and rage at a Negro male who was not pleased with this book for, like, a billion different reasons. One thing, I guess some of the other quick components of the deception, I am going to write a review about this book, but I'll just say the word imagine is in this book 53 times. I've read many of Dorothy Roberts' other works. Shattered Bonds, the word imagine is not in that book at all. How did we go from being a pinpoint legal scholar, citations, footnotes, references, to, I reckon, I imagine, I suspect, like, wait a minute, And a whole lot of the imagining is imagining that my racist peeping Tom dad was some kind of John Brown crusader against racism. That's what a whole lot of the and that's exactly how I phrased what I said. It's a whole lot of reckless speculation to create unearned excuses for racist peeping Toms, and they were so they didn't even class. Wait a minute. He didn't say one racist peeping Tom. You damn right I did not say one racist peeping Tom, because it's plenty. Any hoodles. Let's see. Anything else I need to say before get in? The deception is so. Oh my goodness! I said the burning. You cannot have a project where you go out and burn material. I said that about pornography being. Oh, I forgot the questions. Okay, I was able to give one question, which you will hear, and I already shared the one question about her mom that being consumed, and she didn't even get to get her PhD. The other question, if I'd had time, that I was going to ask. As the author of Shattered Bonds, how do you reconcile your father's 50-year collection of sensitive data on communists and interracial couples, vulnerable groups under the FBI and COINTELPRO surveillance, with anything other than unregulated, intimate state alignment? That was going to be my other question, because at least for me, very early on reading this book, it was so flagrant. These people that he's tracking, especially during this time period, the 30s and 40s, this is like heading into the House on Un-American Activities and all the rest of it. Like, if you are a white person and saying that you are a communist, and or you are a white person at this time and saying that I'm going to marry a Negro, oh my God, like, you are a race traitor and a traitor. You're a double traitor. You are a seditionist, and we're going to keep tabs on you. And what's your phone number? What's your address? Where you live at? Where you work at? All of that. How in the world is that not at least thought like, oh, dang, he is working for a major university, and that was a part of the COINTELPRO program. Like, dang, like, I don't know if I was, even if I'm a white person, if I'm a communist, and I'm married to Leroy, oh my Lord, like, no, I don't want my name in your, and get off my porch. Don't be mamming me and nothing about my Negrohood. Get on out of here. Like, I don't want you want my name and, anyway, that was going to be my other question, because I thought that stood out to me greatly. But again, it might have been the most important thing to ask about project, because that really gets at the core of the deception of all of this I say, hey man, if it was me, Gus T, and y'all gave me 50 years and finance, like in the thousands of dollars of financing to write a book, and in 50 years I ain't wrote nothing, it wouldn't take no 50 years. It wouldn't take no 10 years maybe. It took Isabel Wilkerson, I think she said, about 15 years to write The Warmth of Other Suns. I don't think I would get 10 years. If they done financed and did everything, and I said, I'm gonna write this book, we're gonna get it done, bang, and 10 years done passed and ain't no book, like, what? You ain't got no project, Negro. You illiterate. No. That's just the way that evidence, man. Evidence. Fuller said the same thing, man. Hey, you around here talking about you are a pilot. Let me see you fly the plane. We ain't seen you fly nothing. You are a scooter rider until proven otherwise. Well, you done spent 50 years and we ain't got no publication. You ain't got no project. Get my binoculars again. You will hear the one question that I did ask about predominantly white institutions hiring non-white people who have a white parent. You'll get to hear that, and you'll hear her get some bass in her voice to say, I reject having a genetic tether to white supremacy. Man, I so wish that I had taken pictures throughout this. Dorothy Roberts had just spent like repeated slides. She had her black son up on the board, and then her white dad saying, look at that, don't you see it, I guess it's genetics, look at that. You're going to hear it in the audio even though you won't have the visual. But this happened repeatedly. Her putting her white grandmother up, and as a matter of fact, her name Dorothea, my name Dorothy, that's, hey. That's what I mean. genetic tether to white supremacy, racism. And in fact, let me bring it back. What's my term? Racially restricted region. I said that every paragraph reading this book. You grew up in a racially restricted region and taught in a racially restricted region, Evanston, Illinois, because of your genetics. If you did not have that white daddy, it is very likely you would not have had that professorship at Northwestern. You would not be at UPenn right now. That is exactly, even having had time to think about it, that is exactly the way that I meant to connect my question. There is such a thing as DNA. There is such a thing as genetics, and you literally just bragged about your child looking like his white German granddad. Let him do the Sig Heil. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have said that. I was going to do that at the lecture for real. Like, oh my God, I was going to show my ass. Like, oh my God, you cannot believe the amount of like patience and restraint. I was ready to curse out everybody in the room. And in fact, I was going to say like, oh my God, this is the worst book I've ever read. This is the worst book I've ever read. Hosting a book club that we're going to have today for 14 years. We read Alice Sebold Lucky. This is the worst book I've ever read, and I said that before I went to the lecture tonight. And I got the facts to prove it. You can go and get multiple social media outlets, and even before I said this was the worst book, I had been saying for weeks, it looks like Dorothy Roberts might have written the worst book ever, but I waited till I got to the end before I confirmed. Like, yep, this thing is dreadful. I'm going to give you one more deception before we wrap and get to the audio so you can hear the lecture. Dorothy Roberts does reveal that her dad included her as a subject in his so-called project collection of pornography, Subject 224. Even that, I think, is deceptive because she puts that in the epilogue. You have to slog through 18 chapters, hundreds of pages before you get to, oh, by the way, yes, I was a subject in all this as well. Wait a minute. Like, man, if I have that information in the front, even if you say, hey, people talk about that, she, talks about that in some of her other interviews and ask about that and blah, blah, blah. People have written about that in reviews. So maybe you know that before you go into the book. That is very different. And you reading like 98% of the book. Some people don't read the epilogue. Some people say, hey, I read all the chapters of the book. I'm done. And for all intents and purposes, you are. If you don't read the epilogue, oh, that's where she talks about being. I said, even that. If I get that earlier in the book, that might greatly impact how I think about all of this. As opposed to that's like at the end and you just, oh, it was just about love and kisses and, keep hope alive. Come on. Intellectually dishonest, in my view. But I mean, the dishonesty, and we go right back to the beginning. This ain't no project. I am so reminded and grateful for Renethia Tate, Pieces of a Puzzle, secretsextalk.com, secretsextalk.com. The book, we talk about what they don't want us to share when white men get up with black females, which is what this one is. Like, let's not gussy it up. If you out watching porn at 5 in the morning, that ain't no humanitarian effort. Call it Monsters Ball and let's leave it at that. Get to the lecture, the worst book ever. The worst book ever. The worst book ever. And this is our offering for Negro History Month. I get you to think I should have added the why. I don't even know why this book was published. If you're not going to interrogate your white dad being married to your black mom, if you're not going to interrogate that, why is this book being published? Are you trying to solve a problem? Are you trying to make some money? Why is this book even being published? You done burned half the archives, so we can't even go through and review and come to our own conclusions. Why is this published for Negro History Month? Last two things before we get into it. One, I did use the term tether in my question. I do just want to make sure I get on the record. I'm very aware that some people use that term in connection to other non-white people who are not born here and all that animosity. I've been on the record about all of that. I find all of that repulsive. I'm using it here to connect back to the same thing that she did to her racist, peeping Tom, white father. She does have a Jamaican mom, but Jesus Christ, ain't no term I can apply to her mother Iris other than victim of white supremacy. Period. Totally delectable Negro consumed by racist peeping Toms. Dorothy Roberts would be a victim of white supremacy too, but that does not excuse deliberately lying and especially caping for racist peeping Toms, plural, for Negro History Month. But this ain't got nothing to do with with the black people born in the U.S. and other pretend black, nothing at all. Using tether just because she does have a direct genetic connection to a race soldier peeping Tom. Lastly, you will hear a lot of thumping background noise, as best I can describe it. We were in a bookstore and they do have hard floors. And we were actually on the lowest floor. So unfortunately, you'll be able to hear the same thing that we hear. I think the audio recording worked well enough that you'll hear the other patrons on the upper floors of the bookstore stomping around to get their books and all the rest of it throughout the talk, which is, that was the same experience that we had. So you'll get the total evening enthrall. That said, we will get to it. Visit the blog to invest, racism-notes.blogspot.com, racism-notes.blogspot.com, PayPal in the top right corner, links below, including links to the Amazon wish list. Much obliged to all the folks who've invested for 17 years. Get to it. Context of white supremacy. The worthless Negro from Virginia got my question in and got heckled by the crowd. Never sitting next to black people again. I'm never sitting next to black people again. I previsioned it, and I'm never sitting next to non-white people, victims of white supremacy again. Jesus Christ. Get to it.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the Elliott Bay Book Company. My name is Sean. I'm a bookseller here, and tonight I am very, very excited to say that Dorothy Roberts is here in the readings room with us. And she's here to celebrate the release of her newest book, The Mixed Marriage Project, a memoir of love, race, and family. A few things before we get started. If at any point anyone needs to use the restroom, it is upstairs in the cafe, and the code today is 7131. We do have an elevator to get upstairs, so please just let me know if you prefer to use that. After the program, there will be a signing in the back. And for the signing, you'll want to just form a single line. You can purchase your book from me, and then you can get it signed. You'll also find this month's reading schedule back there, and if you're interested, you can subscribe to our newsletter by scanning the QR code on the top right of the leaflets. It's also online, but our events coordinator, Sophia, loves it when people sign up for the newsletter, and I love making Sophia happy. And wouldn't you love to make Sophia happy? It's very simple. Just subscribe to the newsletter. So in case you didn't already know, Dorothy Roberts is a groundbreaking scholar, social justice advocate, and award-winning author whose work has transformed the way we think about race, family, science, and the law. A distinguished professor of Africana Studies, Law, and Sociology at the University of Pennsylvania, and a MacArthur Genius Fellow, she is widely known for her influential books, including Killing the Black Body, Shattered Bonds, Fatal Invention, and Torn Apart. Her path-breaking work bridges rigorous research and urgent public engagement, and she has been featured in the New York Times, NPR, MSNBC, CBS Sunday Morning, and other major media outlets. Her TED Talk has been viewed more than 1.6 million times. Recent recognitions of her leadership include elections into the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the American Philosophical Society, and the National Academy of Medicine, honorary doctorate degrees from Rutgers University and the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, Time Magazine's 2025 The Closers List, 2025 Status List Award of Leaders in Life Sciences, Society of Family Planning Lifetime Achievement Award, Juvenile Law Center Leadership Prize, and American Psychiatric Association Solomon Carter Fuller Award. Believe it or not, that is actually a shortened list of her accomplishments. I am so excited for this talk. I know you are too. So without any further ado, please join me in welcoming Dorothy Roberts.
Well, I have to say I'm so surprised to see you all here because I don't have that many connections in Seattle besides my dear friend Jenna Hanchard, who is my daughter's lifelong friend. I'm just so thrilled that you all came out to hear about my new book and giving me such a warm welcome. And thanks to Elliott Bay Books for hosting this. I'm just so very grateful. So I am going to start by reading just a little bit from the beginning of my memoir, and then I prepared, and this is my first time doing this, a slideshow. I've been doing conversations, with people, and I thought, well, let me just try something different. So these are some images from the book and some additional ones as well that I'll show as I tell you about my book. And then I'll leave time for Q&A, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Jenna, will you help me keep time?
Yes.
So that, because I really need to wrap everything up, including the signing by 9 o'clock. So
I got you.
Oh, thank you.
I got you.
All right. Nice to have friends around.
Got you.
Okay, so this is from the prologue, The Unfinished Project. 25 large cardboard boxes dominate my office in the sociology department. The outdated building feels uninspiring, and the room is small and drab. Classes start in just a few weeks, and I need to get ready for the fall semester. The late summer heat seeps into the room, making the daunting task ahead feel even heavier. When I moved from Evanston, Illinois to Philadelphia to begin my faculty position at the University of Pennsylvania, I had the boxes shipped directly to my new office. After my father's passing and my mother's devastating stroke and subsequent death a few years later, my sister Evelyn had sent me the boxes from our parents' home. Back then, I was living in a spacious old house near Northwestern University where I was teaching. As the only sibling with a basement big enough to store them and the only academic among us, I became the natural custodian of this archive. For nearly a decade, the boxes gathered dust in my basement while I continued putting off the overwhelming job of sorting through the papers they contained. But when I relocated to Philadelphia, the stack of boxes looming in my office forced me to confront the inevitable. I reached for a pair of scissors from my desk drawer and sliced through the tape sealing one of them. Inside, I find piles of yellowed papers held together by rusty staples, their edges brittle with age. The text on the pages had been created with an old-fashioned typewriter, the kind that went clickety-clack when you pecked at the keys. It hits me. These must be transcripts. Let's see if I move closer to the microphone, it makes a difference. These must be transcripts of interviews my father conducted with interracial couples while I was growing up in Chicago in the 1960s. As far back as I can remember, my father, an anthropology professor, was consumed by writing a book about interracial marriage. His obsession with documenting the lives of black-white couples for his book was a constant presence in my childhood. In the rambling Victorian house in the Kenwood neighborhood, where I grew up with my twin sisters, only a year younger than me, my father's books suffused our family's life. Daddy spent countless hours cloistered in his third-floor study, engaged in the research that defined his career. The Mixed Marriage Project was his life's work, a passion that seemed to permeate every corner of our house and every memory of our upbringing. I pulled the top transcript from the pile. Its thin, crackling pages are so aged that they've turned a dingy beige, the edges of the first sheets chipped away. At the top right corner of the first page is a 4-line caption. I sink into my desk chair, captivated, and begin to read. Interview with Mrs. Alberts. The original typewritten name has been scratched out with black ink, and Alberts is written in longhand, a pseudonym. My heart jumps when I recognize my father's handwriting. 32 -- Prairie Avenue. The last 2 numbers of the address have been erased and replaced with 2 handwritten dashes. By Robert Roberts, February 19, 1937. As far as I know, my father had conducted the interviews in the 1960s. This date must be when Mrs. Alberts got married. I retrieved more transcripts from the box and skimmed the notes at the top. All have dates in 1937. At first I wonder if all the couples he interviewed were married in that year, but that seems an unlikely coincidence. Suddenly it occurs to me, Daddy spoke to these couples in 1937. Computations spring into my head. My father was born in August 1915. That means he was only 21 years old when he interviewed Mrs. Alberts, while he was a graduate student at the University of Chicago. I clutch the stack of transcripts to my chest, unable to move. I feel faint. The date these interviews took place upends the story I have always known about my father's research. For my entire life, I thought that my white father had first started studying interracial relationships when he met my black Jamaican mother in the 1950s. His obsession with mixed marriages was supposed to have been motivated by his falling in love with her when she was a student at Roosevelt College. As a child, I saw my father's research as a reflection of the love my parents had for each other. I believed that my father's faith in the promise of interracial marriage grew from the steadfast devotion they shared. Turns out that he had begun interviewing black-white couples more than a decade before he met my mother. My mind races. How did my young father, the son of Welsh and German immigrants raised in a whites-only neighborhood, become so intrigued by marriages between white people and black people? In deeply segregated Chicago, his childhood neighborhood of Logan Square had been violently protected from the influx of black migrants. My father had been 4 years old at the time of the notorious Red Summer of 1919, when mobs of white people beat, stoned, and shot black residents and burned down their homes and businesses. I wonder if he even knew any black people growing up. More unsettling questions flood my mind. This new timeline suggests that an academic interest in mixed marriages might have prompted my father to pursue one himself. Did he marry my mother because of his obsession with interracial intimacy rather than the other way around? Okay, so let's dig into mystery. All right. Another mystery that I discovered in the interviews, and actually in the boxes, it was something I knew about, but I didn't know the full extent, was this publishing agreement with Simon & Schuster, major publisher in New York City, that my father got in 1969, $2,000 advance we were so excited because as I read, my father's book just dominated our household. He was working on it from as far back as I can remember, and it was an obsession that he had, interviewing hundreds of couples in Chicago, black-white couples, and cloistered up in his study on the 3rd floor and telling us about his interviews and his ideas about interracial marriage. Especially me, he would pull me aside and try to convince me that interracial marriage was the answer to racism in America. And so when he got this contract, which he thought there's a provision in it for movie rights in case it becomes a major motion picture. But he never published the book. He had to return the advance. He got another book contract with J.P. Putnam Sons, which is another major publisher. Delay after delay, extension after extension, he never published it. And all the way into the 1980s, by that point, he started interviewing the children, and he had 100 years of marriages because some of the people whom he interviewed in the 1930s had been married in the 1880s. And then he was interviewing couples in the 1980s. Wow. So he had 100 years of marriages, and he was going to write another idea for a book, 100 years of mixed marriages. Then there was a book about the children of mixed marriages, and he never finished any of the books, any of them. So that's another mystery. Okay, so let me say a little bit. Yes. Okay. A little bit about the origins of my parents and our family. So my father's grandmother, Dora Hook, this lady here, who I'm partially named after, Dorothy, she immigrated to the United States with her family when she was 20 years old in 1883. And her daughter, Johanna Reinert, she married Edward Reinert. Her daughter, Johanna Reinert, married my grandfather, Alfie Roberts, and this is one of my father's brothers, Alfred, and they created a bilingual home in the Logan Square neighborhood of Chicago with the German-speaking, she only spoke German, this one, German-speaking grandparents on the 2nd floor and the English-speaking parents and children on the 1st floor. But my father was bilingual. He spoke fluent German. And then over in the middle are my grandparents on my mother's side. My mother's Jamaican grandmother and grandfather, Jamaican mother and father, who were married who were born in the 1890s in Jamaica. They spent most of their lives in Jamaica. My mother lived in Jamaica until she was 25 years old, and they eventually moved in with us in Chicago in the late 1960s. I'm including at the very end. Can you see? Can you see all the way? No. Oh, you can't see this last photo, I guess. I don't know if there's any way to. Nope, that makes it go to the next one. Okay. Well, just imagine Johanna, my grandmother, who is, and it feels strange to even say this because I didn't know them at all. I didn't know them. But the reason I included this picture, she has on her lap this little blonde-haired, blue-eyed baby whom she's cuddling, who was the son of my father's brother Edward, my Uncle Edward. Edward disowned my father when he married my mother. And when I found that picture, it was so striking to me because it was a picture of this sweet woman holding this little baby who never would have wanted to hold me. I never met her because my father waited until she died to marry my mother. And my mother said,
I can try adjusting.
Oh, thank you so much.
No,
No?
it looks like it cuts off in your slide.
Yeah, it may be that the slides don't.
So you can see a little bit more this way.
Yeah. Okay, you can see there's a baby there. And just imagine this chubby, loving grandma, you know. But my mother told me that my father waited till she died to marry her because he knew that she would be so upset from his marrying a black woman. Now, I also found this picture of my Uncle Edward, who, again, I'd never met him, and I never saw a photo of him until I got these boxes and went through them and looked through the photos. And it just struck me how they look like they're happy together. They're brothers, but growing up, I thought that this was this horrible man who didn't want to know our family. And you're not going to be able to read all of it, but I also found this letter, a birthday card that Edward gave to my father when they reconnected, only when Edward was dying of brain cancer. And my father went to visit him. And he wrote this letter saying that it was so unfortunate that they weren't able to continue their relationship. And he says it has something to do with associations that he had that he couldn't get over. And I don't know what those associations were, but he must mean associations with black people that caused him to be bigoted against black people. And I'm not sure exactly what, but it is a mystery to me that my father turned out so differently from his brother. My father was interviewing interracial couples because he believed that Chicago had what he called a racial caste system that was similar to the racial caste system in Natchez, Mississippi. And he was trying to figure out what upheld it and also what would dismantle it. And he was on this mission from when he was in college. I found papers that he wrote where he challenges the professor's views that white people were superior, that intelligence was inherited. And he writes about his white privilege and his gender privilege also in this first year psychology paper. So another mystery in this memoir is how did he turn out so differently from his mother and his father? And one answer is, I'm sure, has to do with a trip he made with his grandmother, Dora Reinert, to India to visit his aunt and uncle. Dora's daughter, my father's aunt Ella, if you look all the way to the right, was a missionary in India. And his grandmother, Dora, took him on his 16th birthday, took him for a tour around the world throughout Southeast Asia, ending up in India, where they spent 6 months living in a village up near the Himalayas. And my father writes in this very meticulous diary he kept that he didn't see another white person for a long time and only saw 2 other than his uncle and aunt. But my father was very intrigued by Southeast Asian and Indian culture, and no shred of judgment or sense that the cultures were strange. He was just very interested in participating in the cultures and learning the language, the tribal languages, and teaching little boys who became his friends English if they would teach him their native language. Okay, I'm going to move ahead to the 1930s. So as I already indicated, my father began interviewing these couples in 1937 when he was 21 years old, going into the black belt of Chicago because all of the couples he interviewed lived in black communities. That means the white spouses also lived in the black belt. And he was part of a research project that he joined as soon as he got to University of Chicago. That's a picture of him, I think probably around the time that he was doing this research. And it was a project by Lloyd Warner, renowned anthropologist at University of Chicago at the time, and Horace Caton, who was also a sociologist and was working for the government in this government-funded research project, the first one ever to look at Black life in a northern city. So this is a major research project that my father, I can imagine, was really excited about joining. And I also imagine that these professors were probably really excited to have this 17-year-old who, I'm sorry, 21, he was 17 when he went to college, a 21-year-old who had lived in India and was interested in studying caste, interested in comparing the caste system in India with what he called the racial caste system. And Lloyd Warner also believed that there was a caste system in the United States. All right, so as I already indicated, when my father began these interviews, the Black Belt had already begun to be constructed in Chicago, because this was the era of the great migration of Black people from the South, escaping Jim Crow, lynching, and looking for better jobs in the North. And he began this project at this time where the population in Chicago had quadrupled by 1940. I mean, it was a mass. I'm sure you all have heard about the Great Migration, the warmth, the book, The Warmth of Other Suns, and other ways you might know about it. And so he was roaming into these Black communities looking for white people who married Black people and were living there to interview them about their lives. And I don't know how he did it. There was no list of them. He had to just go in there and find them. And I could go on about his methods. They're really interesting. He would figure out ways to, places where he would imagine that Black and white people would congregate together. He would find one couple and ask them if they knew other couples. I'll talk about in a minute, a social club that he had discovered that was for interracial couples, that was founded in the late 1800s. And he discovers that most of these couples living in the Black Belt also were experiencing extreme discrimination, I think mainly because they were living in this segregated area that had depressed housing, while they were being charged more than rents were in the white areas. Employment discrimination, discrimination by police officers, but it was compounded by the fact that they were interracial couples, which was considered taboo. It was even by the moral court in Chicago considered a form of illicit sex, even though these couples were married. I tell the stories about even someone a Black man who was jailed, even though for fornication, even though he was married to the woman he was having sex with, but she was white. Police raids into parties that couples were holding. Some marriage clerks just refusing to grant licenses. So there are lots and lots of stories from these 1930s interviews about discrimination against them. Again, because of the structural racism in America that now even white people are experiencing because they're married to a Black person. Okay, well, I'm going to have to try to remember this quote. Okay, so this is just a transcript of one of the white women in the 1930s that my father interviewed, Mrs. Tyler. She was from Czechoslovakia, and she married the foreman on a job she was working at where most of the other employees were black. And the foreman was black, and they fell in love and got married, but she was extremely disillusioned by this marriage because she, along with so many of the white women who had come from Europe to the United States, had no idea the extent of racism in America. They thought that if they married an American citizen, a U.S. citizen, it would help them assimilate into white culture. It would raise their status above the status of an immigrant. But what they found is that their status was diminished. It was degraded because they had married a U.S. citizen who was black. And so many of them said, I should have just married another white immigrant, a European immigrant. I would have been better off. Mrs. Tyler says, if I could recall, well, I'll paraphrase. You can see part of the quote I put there. But she says to my father that when she came, she thought America was free for everybody. She had been told in the old country that America was a land of freedom. And she says, that isn't true. That isn't true. And I would never have married my husband. Had I known this, I wouldn't have the nerve. And that's repeated over and over and over by so many of the European immigrant women who married black men. They told stories about how when they drove with their husbands, they would sit in the back so people would think their husband was their chauffeur and that they weren't married. They couldn't reveal their address because that would show that they were living in the Black Belt, which meant they must have been married or at least living with a black man. Their husbands couldn't visit them in the hospital because then the staff, nursing staff, and the doctors would know that they were married to a black man and they'd get terrible treatment, or it might be reported back to their employer and they'd be fired. So lots of stories like that. Now, I mentioned a social club that my father discovered. This was a club for interracial couples, and he was interested in it both because he wanted to know the members so he could interview them. You know, what a great source for finding these couples. A club where all the members were interracial couples. And also, by this point, it's very obvious my father's interested in dating black women. And he talks about going to dances with black women and looking, you could just tell the extra questions he asks about where he's going to find black women. And his disappointment when he goes to a dance thrown by the Communist Party, and by the way, this was one of his major sources, was the Communist Party in Chicago. They had a disproportionate number of interracial couples who were members. I mean, disproportionate compared to the general Chicago population. And he goes to a dance there, and all the interracial couples, though, are white women with black men. And he's just, very disappointed that he can't find a black girl to dance with. But he finds other places where he can dance with black girls and go to parties. Well, one party especially. Well, I'll get to that when I get to the Okay, we'll leave that I'm coming up to the 1950s soon. But this club was called the Manasseh Club. And you can see he's here standing in front of a monument at a cemetery for the Ladies Manasseh Club number 1 that was erected in 1922. The Manasseh Club, among the various benefits it had for its members, was a burial site at a cemetery because black people could not be buried where white people were buried. So this split up families. One woman says it's so sad that her children couldn't come to the burial, the funeral of her sister because they were black. And so this was a special place where interracial couples could be buried together. They had different forms of insurance. They put on dances and just a place where they felt safe gathering. But my father notices that most of the wives he finds are white and the husbands are black. And he asks them, where are the black women and white husbands? Where are they? And one of them says, you can read part of the quote there, most of the Manasseh women don't want to have anything to do with colored women. Why? Because colored women have loose morals. And where do they get this idea? Well, of course, partly from the stereotypes that have been circulating since the slavery era, that black women are sexually licentious and lascivious and depraved. That's something I've spent a whole career writing about and trying to challenge these stereotypes. And they were circulating even among these interracial couples in the Manasseh society. And the theme that they kept repeating and that ran through a lot of the interviews in the 1930s was that black women and white men don't get married. They sleep together, but they don't get married. And the blame was often put on black women because they don't demand that white men marry them. One black doctor said to my father, if only colored women would demand that white men put a ring on their finger, white men would be the most in favor of interracial marriage of anybody. So this is something that for me reinforced my disagreement with my father, the idea that interracial intimacy is necessarily a path to racial equality, because in my mind, these couples that were part of the Manasseh society were reinforcing racist stereotypes and reinforcing a racial hierarchy in their exclusion of black women and their vilifying stereotypes about them. Another distressing aspect of the Manasseh society that was very prevalent was the common desire to have children who could pass as white. Many of them did not want to call their children colored children. Colored was the term that was being used to describe black people at the time. And they didn't want to call them black, basically. They wanted them to be Manasseh children, mixed children that were closer to white than to black. And many of them the white spouse chose light-skinned black partners in hopes that their children could pass as white. And the black partners chose white spouses in hopes that their children could pass as white. Not all of them, but there were a significant number of couples my father interviewed that were very, very obsessed with color and very hopeful that their children could pass as white, and very proud to boast that their children could pass as white. Another example of interracial intimacy not necessarily challenging at all racist stereotypes or the racial caste system in Chicago. I'll just say one more thing about, I'll say a couple more things about the Manasseh Society. One is just where the name came from. Anybody recognize that name? Manasseh?
Egypt, the Bible?
Yes, it's from the Bible, from the Old Testament. Joseph, the young man who was sold into slavery by his brothers, they were jealous of him. And then Joseph was able to manage Pharaoh's crops and business very astutely. And Pharaoh, the Egyptian Pharaoh, gifted him an Egyptian bride. and their son was Manasseh. So they saw Manasseh as a mixed race child, and that's what they called their club. All right, I'm going to move into the 1950s now. I have a chapter called Life Imitates Art. And it begins, prior to the 1950s. This is a prelude to this period in the 1940s where I don't have very many interviews because my father enlisted in the Army during World War II. He did not want to serve in the Army. He wrote a very passionate appeal to get out of Army service so he could continue working on his PhD in anthropology at University of Chicago. And then he wrote another letter saying that because of the recent attack, which I assume is the attack on Pearl Harbor, he realizes that he can't be excused from Army service. But he writes this passionate appeal that he not have to carry a weapon. He says, I would be a terrible soldier. I don't believe in violence. Since I was little, it's so sad. He says, the lads used to chase me home and try to get me to fight, and I refused to fight. They called me Percy, and I had to look it up. Percy was an epithet for an effeminate man. At that time. And he says, I've long hated the way in which Indians, Native Americans have been treated. What kind of civilization is this that would take someone's land? He just goes into this long appeal. I would rather, if I was faced with someone, I would rather be killed myself to be put out of my misery than kill another person. It's so passionate. Well, I mean, it's there's a real defense of. He also goes into opposing tariffs. And also he didn't like organized religion because he thought that also created divisions among human beings. But he does enlist, and he gets the perfect job. He's in charge of entertaining the soldiers through tours of England and France and Belgium, where he was stationed. And he told us that on D-Day he was in a foxhole, but he never carried a weapon. He said, my weapon was my typewriter. That's what he told us. So while he was in overseas, this book, you could only see a portion of it, but anybody hear of Black Metropolis? Any social scientists? Like this is a classic about Black life in Chicago by St. Clair Drake and Horace Caton, who was one of the lead investigators of this the study that my father participated in. St. Clair Drake was also a graduate student with my father who worked on that study, and they wrote this classic book, Black Metropolis, using, in one chapter, my father's interviews of interracial couples. So they published this book, used my father's research, but he never published a book himself. Oh, I just put this here because that's Des.
Just like
this is my youngest son. Do you see the resemblance? I mean, if you knew them, you'd see it. I tried to find a picture that kind of looks like it's as if my father's spirit went into, well, I suppose it's genes or something like that. But look at that. Yeah, they're so remarkably similar. Okay. Now, what is this? This is another transcript from the 1950s. Now, this was the most shocking transcript. If you can read the top, yes. Where did he find this couple?
Nude beach.
At a nudist camp, yes. Yeah. I'm like, what? Mr. Alberti and Mrs. Alberti, my father encountered at a nudist camp, and Mr. Alberti has the longest lasting relationship with my father, where it is so entangled, his friendship and his research, you cannot separate them. And because my father includes in the files on Mr. Alberti both a tape-recorded transcript where he's asking him questions that he asks everybody, but also he also includes just discussions they have, mostly about Mr. Alberti's extramarital affairs. And yeah, it's just amazing. And then there's a whole description of a party where Mrs. Alberti throws a birthday party for her husband, and Mr. Alberti, Bill, calls him up. Now, these are all pseudonyms. Calls him up and says, "You're invited to the party, but you have to bring a girl," they say girl, "of another race. Everyone at this party has to be a mixed race couple." So my father brings a colored girl to the party, and then in the middle of the party, he leaves and picks up another colored girl to bring to the party. So he brings two to the party. And I won't go into all, you have to buy the book to read the details of what happens at this party. I will say my sister, Evelyn, did not want me to include this chapter in the book. She thought that my mother would be mortified if she were alive and knew about it, and that it would change people's impression of our upstanding family. You know, she's even now she'll make comments like, I'll say, well, so this friend of ours from when we were young bought the book, and she said, "Oh, what will they think about us now?" You know? But it's just a fascinating relationship he has with this man, who I now realize exactly who he is. He was one of my father's best friends, and his daughter, who my father describes in the notes, and also it was when he said that he went to pick me up at their house after I'd spent the night at the house, and I realized who this little girl is. She was a friend of mine, a very close friend of mine, who, by the way, she could pass as white. She looked as if she was white, but I never knew her mother, because her mother died tragically from a botched abortion, which I did not know until I read the interview notes. I had no idea, but I knew when I was little that her mother had died. And it just, reading these interviews and reading about her and our family ties, it was so clear now that my father's personal life and his research were so entangled, and so was my life in his research. So was my life in his research. I realized my piano teacher was one of the people that he interviewed. Yeah.
Is her mother Jeanette?
Yes.
Okay.
But remember, these are pseudonyms. But I know their real name, and I will not reveal it. Okay, what time is it?
It's almost 8 o'clock.
Okay, I'm going to move a little more rapidly so I can leave time for Q&A. Meanwhile, my mother was growing up in Jamaica, and at age 25, she left Jamaica with her oldest sister, my Aunt Violet, and moved to Liberia. And they became Liberian citizens. Now, this is another mystery that I had throughout my childhood. Mommy, why did you move to Liberia? And as I began to learn about the Marcus Garvey movement, are you all familiar with the Marcus Garvey? One of the major now we would say civil rights, Black liberation activists of the 20th century. It's maybe, I would say, one of the most influential political people of the 20th century, was leading a Back to Africa movement. And I thought this had to, he's from Jamaica, thought my mother's moving to Liberia had to have something to do with it, but she would never say that. She'd never acknowledge that. I find out, though, that this man, do you see Martin Luther King Jr.? Mm-hmm. Okay, so the man to his left, if I have that correct, okay, with the bow tie, that's my mother's uncle. That's my mother's uncle. He was the head of the Marcus Garvey movement in Jamaica.
Wow.
So it had to have, right? That had to have an influence on her. All right. Now, she learns in Liberia that there is a scholarship being offered by Roosevelt University in Chicago. She applies, she gets it, and she takes a ship to Galveston, Texas from Liberia and gets up to Chicago, and that's where she meets my father, who was a professor there at that time. So my sister Evelyn had this love letter that my father wrote to my mother, which helps me to pinpoint when they fell in love. And she was still she was a rising senior at Roosevelt at the time. And this note is tucked into a book. Oh, sorry, that's my dude. Who knows what else might pop up on it? But anyway, he writes this letter to her tucked in a book, the autobiography of Ira. Where is it? Arabelle Thompson, who was a Black woman who was the international correspondent for Ebony magazine. And she wrote a book about her life. And my father writes that until a month ago, the author of this book, so of course a Black woman, right, was my dream girl, whom I admired as a most wonderful person, the type I would be proud to call a friend. Now you have taken her place. I trust that you will. I think he knew her, because she was around University of Chicago. I think he knew her, yeah. Call a friend, okay? Now you have taken her place. I trust that you will enjoy reading Arabelle Thompson's life story. Accept it as a slight token in celebration of 1 month of perfect happiness and love. May I always be your one and only Bob. And there's a picture of them around that time. Well, you can't see him. Okay, I can see him on my... Anyway, I think they're embracing, lounging that summer together. I figured that it has to be from the summer of love. Okay. Now, what I don't know is exactly what came first. Again, was it that she became his research assistant and they fell in love, or did they fall in love and she became his research assistant? But around this time, she begins to interview all the wives, and he interviews all the husbands. This also was a surprise to me, because I had no idea my mother was involved in his book project at all. And now I discover she's finding these couples in Chicago. She's interviewing all the wives. Half of the interviews in the 50s, she did. And yet, she never took credit for it as we were growing up. She harassed my father constantly to write the book. Finish the book. And I always thought she was so mean to him. My mother had a slight British accent, and when I think about her, I think about the main thing that comes back to me is
Bob, finish the book! But he never did. But I know now, of course, she wanted him to finish this book. I think, number one, she contributed so much to it. Mm-hmm. Number two, she gave up her PhD when I and my sisters were born. Mm-hmm. She would have written a book, but she gave that up. And number three, I think that she married him expecting him to rise, and become a famous author and rise in the academic ranks. And he didn't do it. He was satisfied to stay at Roosevelt and never finish his book. I mean, he was disappointed, but not enough to get him to write it, right? Okay. All right. This is a picture of another aspect of the 1950s. I'm just touching on a few aspects here and there. There's a lot more, but one major community that my father interviewed, and also that he brought together, were the black servicemen who married so-called war brides in Europe while they were stationed in Germany and France and Italy. And this is a birthday party. My mother, you can see I think you can see her, right? Oh, she's over all the way over there. And these women are all married to the men behind them. And I truly believe that there's no way all of these war brides and black servicemen would have come together at a birthday party. They wouldn't have known each other in Chicago if it weren't for my father interviewing all of them and my mother interviewing all the wives and bringing them together. And it caused me to wonder if his project had a real impact on the number of interracial marriages in Chicago. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to have that impact, but I think it may have happened through his community building as opposed to through writing a book about it. All right, this is just some photos of my mother as a graduate student at Northwestern University. Her advisor was Melville Herskovits, who is the short white guy, you can see there. He started the first African Studies program in the United States at Northwestern University, a renowned anthropologist, and he was my mother's dissertation advisor. And here, when William Tubman, the president of, that's the hand she's holding, is the president of Liberia. He came to Roosevelt and Northwestern when he came to the United States. And she greeted him at both. There's another photo in the Chicago Sun-Times of her greeting him at Roosevelt. Again, I think my mother had this influence that never got any credit. All right, 1954, they get married. My mother, you could see Homer Jack, the minister who was one of the founding members of CORE, and a pretty radical Unitarian minister. He married them because the Methodist minister at the church my mother went to, white Methodist minister in Evanston, refused to marry them. And this civil rights activist agreed to marry them. Okay, that's me as a baby. 3 months old, we moved to Liberia. And my father spends 2 years teaching there. My sisters were born there. There are just some photos from Liberia. Here is my mother on a procession to a West African, a Liberian village with Melville Herskovits. Again, I have to believe she had something to do with getting him access to these villages in Liberia. Oh, and over there is my first year birthday party, but you can't see it in Liberia. Okay, I just like this photo of me and my mother on the beach in Monrovia. Okay, Kenwood. All right, I'm going to fly through this because I want to leave time for Q&A. This is the house that my father bought in Kenwood when we came back from Liberia. Kenwood, at this point, was an integrated neighborhood, and one of the very few integrated neighborhoods in Chicago in the 1960s. Still today, probably one of the very few integrated neighborhoods in the 90s. It's a magical house. I have a lot of description. This house was a wonderful house to grow up in. It was very eccentric. Just one tidbit about it. The prior owners were like to go on safaris in Africa, and the wife was an artist, and she painted many of the walls in the house with murals of life from Africa, mostly animals. So we had, elephants and giraffes and monkeys and all sorts of wildlife on the walls in our house. And here are just some family photos. Oh, unfortunately, you can't see the photo of my father swinging us, but anyway, just some family photos growing up in Kenwood. Major influence on me was my father's library. In that study he had on the third floor, the walls were lined with books, and that's my very first memory of reading to myself were my father's books about mostly on Africa and India, but other subjects too, but mostly those. And another big influence were the parties that my parents had for sociologists and anthropologists coming from all over the world. In that photo over there, that's me with St. Clair Drake and Jan Heinz Jahn, who was a German anthropologist. And that's Drake at the table with my father, my mother, my grandfather, and just another party. But you see, they always included us in these parties where they're talking about world affairs and politics and all of that. But we were absorbing of the discussions. C.O.W.S. School, very influential, very, again, a rare integrated school, economically, religiously, racially, and with a very definite civil rights and anti-war ethos at the school. And I'm going to end it here with my epilogue, which I call research participant number 224, because I found in the interviews of children a file on me that my father kept. I was number 224, and in the file, I'll just mention one aspect of it, is an essay that I believe he asked me to write about my views about my identity. And I haven't talked much about it, but in the memoir, I do write a lot about my changing identity from when I was really little to college to today. And when I was in college, I hid the fact that my father was white. I had become very close to a very closely knit group of Black students, and I was afraid that if they knew my father was white, I wouldn't be as accepted as I wanted to be. And this photo of me and my father, which was taken during winter break after my first year in college, is very significant because, I mean, maybe you can tell we were extremely close, but that whole prior semester, I was deliberately hiding that he was white. And even in a class where we were supposed to identify each other's ethnicity, in a sociology course on ethnicity, everyone said, Dorothy's Black, and except this one white guy who said, well, I think she's got some European ancestry in her. And the teacher looked at me and said, is that true, Dorothy? And I remember I was terrified. And I said, well, I have a grandmother who's white, but I've never met her. Which is true. I showed you. Well, this picture is significant because my father had, I think he must have set up a tripod automatically snap us together. But there's also a picture that he took just of me. And when I came back from winter break, I was showing my boyfriend, the first boyfriend, because my mother wouldn't allow me to date at all until I was free from her clutches and found a boyfriend at college. But I was showing him the pictures. I did not show him that picture because I didn't want him to know my father was white. And then I did show him the photo that my father took just of me. You will see I took my glasses off. I just got my new afro cut, and I think I thought I was looking good, So I wanted to show him this photo that my father took of me, and all of a sudden, I don't know if you can see, there's a mirror behind us. And you could see my father in the mirror, in the photo, which I didn't notice. And I can remember, I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I going to... And I grabbed the photo, and I put it down, and again, and he told me, well, Jenna, you said you were surprised when he found out my father was white. So he told me that finally he came, over spring break, he came to stay with us in Evanston, and he told me that he was so shocked when my father came to the door and opened the door. By that point, I was ready to reveal this secret. But I felt reading this essay I wrote to my father where I write about all of this, I felt so bad because we were so close. We were so close. And I really regret that I felt that I couldn't claim, being a black woman and having a white father. And one thing of the many things that have come out of this memoir is that I feel perfectly comfortable and honored that to say that this man was my father. I think that I wouldn't have been such an advocate for racial justice if it weren't for him. He's the one, and my mother too, but especially my father. His main message to me, apart from what interracial marriage could do, is that there is one human race, we have a common humanity, and we need to treat each other as equal human beings. And I'll leave you with this message, which I arrived at in writing my memoir, is that perhaps the most important thing for us to be doing right now is to figure out how we can love each other as equal human beings in a racist society. We have to work on that, and I think that's the answer. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to marry someone of another race, but if you do, I do believe that we need to think about how it's related to structures of racism and racial stereotypes in our society, and how we can build a transformative kind of love that doesn't replicate the racial caste system that my father was fighting against, but is a kind of love that will truly transform our society into one where racial hierarchy is unimaginable. So I'll end there. I know I went longer than All right, so I'm happy. I do want to also leave time to sign books. So I will take some questions. What time is it now?
8:15.
Okay,
15 minutes.
Yeah, we could go for. Okay, so this is what I saw. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, but there. Okay. So now the hands are going. See, this is so hard. But I saw your hand. Go on. Yes, sir.
Greetings, Professor Roberts. Just for full context, I interviewed you 3 times before about killing the black body.
Okay, and you look so familiar.
I was at the University of Washington in 2024 when you were here for year 2, so long time. I guess, as the young people say, to keep it 100, I did find many parts of this book to be dishonest and filled with a lot of what I would call reckless speculation in support of unearned racist peeping toms. It forced me to go back and check Dr. Carolyn West at the University of Washington, her work on pornography and white supremacy.
Yes.
She talked about the porn classic, the Blacker Burberry.
Yes.
In the book, Your Dad's Term of Endearment.
Yeah, he said that.
Anyway, my 3 quick questions. Number one.
Okay, but you said you thought I was dishonest?
I thought the book.
Okay, because of what? Because you're saying...
we could start with project. I generally think of a project as a methodology and a finish. He spent 50 years and didn't publish anything and had all the white power in the world. That seems disingenuous even to call it a project, but it's many things I could get to.
Are you saying you have to publish something to be a project?
For a white man with all that power, 50 years and salary, you have no excuse to that. You spent 50 years. You have no excuse to that. He didn't write a paragraph from what I read in the book, but that notwithstanding.
No, that's not, but I just cite, he did publish articles, which I cite the book. But go on.
That's not the book that he was supposed to publish that he got the advance for. He didn't publish anything but that history. They asked him to do.
Was there a question that you had that you wanted to ask?
My 3 questions.
3? No,
we'll do one because we have other people here that have questions.
My question.
Thank you. Don't make it 3
Did you sign me get 2? Did you sign me
No,
get 2?
one question. One question.
Get 2 quick questions?
One question.
Because there are other people who have. Go on.
My last question, my one question would be, you in the book present a lot of personal grievances against black males who are in sexual arrangements.
Now we're getting that. That's the issue.
I had other questions. But they fussed at me. That one specifically, you cited black male NBA players at the draft who are with their white moms and or white spouses. And I was curious to know, do you have any data or thoughts on predominantly white institutions that hire black professors that have one white parent like yourself, so it gives the impression that they support black people, when in actuality they would prefer to hire someone who has a genetic tether to the system of white supremacy?
Well, first of all, I don't believe in genetic tethers to anything. I don't think that our genes tether us to anything. I think that's genetic determinism. And to me, the idea of a genetic tether is a eugenicist concept. I don't think our genes determine practically anything about us. But I do agree with you. That there is a preference for whiteness in this nation. I agree with you. But see, I do not think that I was being dishonest in the book, because I grapple with that a lot. In fact, I even grapple with the privilege that I had because I had a white father. I criticize myself for not acknowledging that I had a privilege because of it. And I point out that because I was so anxious not to be seen as having any connection to whiteness, I didn't acknowledge, as I should have, privileges that I got from having a white father. So just on that point, and I recognize that. Yes, I think that is true, that universities tend to hire certain black people. I don't think it's just black people who have a white parent. I think it's black people who may have lighter skin. There's a lot of black people with 2 black parents who look whiter than I do. I don't think I look that much. I fooled most of the people in that class. But I think also, some people have pointed out the hiring of immigrants from Africa at higher rates, or acceptances into schools. I'm not sure on what the latest data on that are, but the whole book is about racial hierarchy and my opposition to it. And when it comes to NBA players, I'm just asking, it's very obvious that there are a disproportionate number of NBA players who have white mothers than in the general population.
You cited social media for that. Do you have data for that?
Ms. Dorothy, we have a couple other questions to get to. I want to make sure we can get to them. Did you want to ask your question?
And I explicitly say that I have no right to judge what their marital choices are. But anyway, okay, go. I don't know.
She had a question.
Okay, thank you. Go on. Okay. Can you help Jenna? I know that I've enlisted you in this.
Yep.
I'm
going to
go a different route here.
Please.
I'm a trauma therapist, and I really enjoyed reading Killing the Black Body.
Thank you.
I actually cited in my own upcoming book that addresses racial trauma in healthcare. And so as a clinician, I work with a lot of interracial families, people. My own brother's father is white. And I'm wondering, so for people in the mental health field, therapists like myself, what do you wish more therapists understood about working with interracial mixed families? And I haven't read the book yet, but I'm wondering if there's anything within the book to help us help y'all.
Well, so I think number one, we shouldn't have any predetermined ideas about what it means to grow up with parents of a different race, because there's so much variation in how people identify. You know, I identify as Black. I don't identify as mixed race or biracial, but many people who have parents of two different races identify as mixed or biracial or multiracial or that sort of thing. So even just how you identify differs. Whether you feel that you don't belong to either community differs as well. Until I went to college, I never felt that I didn't belong anywhere. And even in college, I didn't feel excluded from that group of Black students. I actually think that my worry was misplaced. But there are many people who express that they didn't feel they belonged either to, you know, if we talk about Black and white parents, you know, Black community or white community. So that sense of belonging differs a lot. I've been reading memoirs of people who have parents of a different race, and that comes up a lot about not belonging to either group. That wasn't my experience, but I think it's very common. So I guess my first point would be not to assume that there's necessarily one kind of sense of identity or necessarily a sense of, that there is a sense of trauma. So that's, I think, one point that comes out in my book is the variety of ways that people approach their identities. I've mentioned some groups that wanted their children to be white, whereas some parents, I think that would cause a form of trauma. And they even expressed that their children were surprised when they're treated like other Black children after their parents told them that they weren't. So it depends on what are the parents telling the children. There are parents my parents interviewed who want their children to identify as Black. There's some who want their children to identify as white. There's some who say it's up to my children. I don't want to steer them one way or the other. So in terms of what the interviews I described in my book show, I think the main thing is the variety of ways in which people approach their identities and their sense of belonging. I think it also shows, though, that because we live in a society where race makes so much of a difference and determines people's opportunities and how they're treated and stereotypes about them, that it is something that you have to pay attention to. I think it's probably very, very unlikely that someone who's raised with parents of two different races, that it's not going to affect them in some way. I think it's just that we can't predict what that way is. So, I say this to doctors as well who are treating, the physical body, that you can't make any assumptions about your patient based on their race. You have to come in with the open-mindedness that race itself doesn't determine anything. Racism does. And that's what you want to inquire about.
So I think it's so interesting that you just touched on this, because I have black dad, white mom, and then white husband.
Yeah.
So I always tried to, my mom would guilt, because my dad wasn't a picture, Papa Rolling Stone, all that.
Yeah, that makes a difference too.
Yes.
Are you raised by both of these parents or not?
Right.
Yeah.
And so I was raised by my mom, who spent a lot of time around black people. But in where I grew up in Spokane, in like the Hilliard area, is really it was always the darker side of like oppression and like the people that struggled the most. And it was really hard for me because I didn't really know what blackness should have been or what it looked like. And I didn't have a good role model for that. And so I didn't know what to expect, so I was always just white. But it was so funny because I've been called a nigger, I've never been called a cracker. So it's one of those things being mixed like that, because I was always the black friend that talked white, or I acted white, but I was never white enough to be white. So I think it's really interesting that you're touching on this, and it kind of makes my heart a little happy, because in a way I was always supposed to, my mom, I identified as mixed because I wasn't black, but I also wasn't white. So the way you just described, like, I identify as black, and I think that's really cool. I'm sorry, this is more of a statement, but because I've always struggled with kind of that duality of like not knowing whether or not I'm allowed to be black. And so I really appreciate you kind of saying that, like, that's what I said, like,
Claim it.
I've experienced being black, therefore I am black.
Exactly. That's what your experience is. And, maybe I think that appearance also has something to do with it. Most people identify me as black, and it's not just that I'm accepting what other people say, but I like the way you put it. That's what you experience. That's what you experience. And so, I can't tell you how to identify, but I think if you want to identify as a black woman, go ahead. I think you can. Now, that doesn't mean this is not a racial dolezal situation. A white woman who's experienced being white her whole life, raised by white people, her parents are white, and she decides she wants to be black. That's different from your experience. I really like the way you said you have experience being black. It is about experience. Yeah.
We probably can do maybe about 3 more questions and then wrap.
Okay. Okay, this is quick, and then and that gentleman there, and then that back there also, but maybe you saw people over here.
Okay, no, that's okay.
Go ahead.
Did your dad use Johnson Publishing Company resources since you were in Chicago?
Well, he collected a lot of, we had Ebony magazine in our house, and he collected a lot of them. They were very influential. In fact, I believe that the reason why he went to the nudist camp to look for interracial couples is because Ebony had published an article on black people becoming members of, the nudist movement. And I think he thought, maybe I'll find an interracial couple there. But I don't know that he did beyond collecting Ebony magazine. By the way, at C.O.W.S School, John Johnson's niece was in my class, and I was the co-editor of the C.O.W.S newspaper, and Johnson met with us with my co-editor at his office. So yeah, sure. Okay, I think this gentleman here in the blue shirt.
Yeah, thank you. So, full disclosure, I grew up in Chicago area. My mother was from Jamaica.
Oh, wow.
My father was actually from South Wales in Swansea.
Are you serious?
He attended Roosevelt University for.
Oh, come on now. This is too much.
And Chicago was a terrible place to grow up with parents from a mixed marriage.
Yeah. You weren't in Kenwood then, because
No, I was out in the western suburbs.
Yeah.
But the Hollywood narrative would be that these two people fall in love, they come together through all these challenges, and they never have a moment of regret. And they die perhaps in each other's arms. And yet showed the story of maybe the immigrants from like Czechoslovakia.
Oh, yeah.
If I could, if you have a sense, what do you think your parents' experience was around that?
You mean whether they had regrets, So I think that because they were so invested in this project, unpublished project, but believe me, it was a project, that they had an extra incentive to stay together. I don't know for sure, but I feel that, especially after reading all the interviews, that they were so invested in this project that was a reason to stay together, to weather the disagreements. But as I mentioned, my mother was extremely frustrated that my father never published this book and didn't go to a more prestigious university. St. Clair Drake was hired by Stanford to start its African Studies program. And that really did it, because Drake, you started out with Drake, and now Drake is going to Stanford and starting a program there, and you're still at Roosevelt? No, I think Roosevelt was a great place. It was amazing. I write a bit about it, and produced a lot of major scholars and civil rights activists and politicians and that kind of thing. But for my mother, it wasn't, she wanted to see advancement, and so it wasn't all Hollywood, and also my mother loved to shop. She was very glamorous, and my father was a penny pincher. So that caused tensions as well. But they also had so much in common. They loved to travel. They had this common sense of a mission to support our common humanity. They liked having around people from different cultures and different parts of the world. They had an interest in anthropology. So there was a lot to keep them together as well. But they'd stayed together until my father passed away in 2002, almost 50 years. Yeah. Okay, only one more?
Well, you want to sign books, right?
I know. I'm going to have to catch a flight tonight. Oh my gosh. Okay, you know what? Well, I'm going to do two more because I saw this hand over here for a long time, and then I'll get to you. Okay, so just two more. Sorry, that's all I can do. Go on.
I just wanted to say that you were the most lovely storyteller.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Okay, you have a question too. Go on.
My question was, what age did your parents get married, and was it during or after segregation was abolished?
They got married before. Well, it was segregated. You mean like the Civil Rights Acts? And so those Civil Rights Acts were in the 1960s, and Lovin versus Virginia, which held that, it was 1967. So they were married 13 years prior to that, in 1954. They were married before all of the victories of the civil rights movement. They were married the year of Brown versus Board of Education, but the civil rights laws, like the Voting Rights Act, and those were after they were married. My father was, They were married in 1954. He was born in 1915. 39? Yeah, and my mother was 32, so they were pretty up there. As I said, part of it was my father waited until his mother died. So that delayed the marriage, but just by a couple of years, Thank you. Okay, and then over there.
Yes.
Oh, yes, this gentleman over there.
I'm very grateful for your scholarship.
Thank you.
Thank you for your wisdom and sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
When I engage with mixed race content, I'm mostly encountering stuff that focuses around white people interacting with other races. I'm wondering if you could recommend any sources where there's other types that are not necessarily revolving around whiteness. Yeah, that is true. That's a couple limits of my father's interviews were that he was only interviewing black-white couples, although he had a Fulbright fellowship in Egypt and he was interviewing their Christian-Muslim marriages among Egyptians. I have a postdoctoral fellow at Penn. I was on her dissertation committee. Her name's Olivia Hu, H-U, and she has published a couple articles already from her dissertation. Her research is on East Asian women who are dating. It's not about marriage, it's about intimate relationships. East Asian men, South Asian men, white men, and black men, and the kinds of attitudes that their families have, the way in which the different racial backgrounds of whom they're dating matters to their ideas about race and equality and marriage and intimacy. She finds that Asian women who are with white men tend to, in her sample, tend to become more conservative. She finds that, this is known statistically that East Asian men are the least likely to be preferred as partners compared to white men and black men and South Asian men. She looks at some of the stereotypes about East Asian men that are stated in some of the interviews and also in our culture, in dominant U.S. culture. It's interesting. Black women and East Asian men are, black women are the only women. Black women are the women who are most likely excluded by men of their own race on dating apps. In other words, black men who exclude black women among the categories of women they want to interview, they want to date, and East Asian men are the most likely of men to be excluded by women of their own race or ethnicity. Sorry, where can we find these journals, these articles?
Look up Olivia Hu, H-U, and she has a website, and you'll find the articles. I don't have the citations in front of me, but she's written them. And Amy Steinbugler, I think I have her last name correct, has also written a book about interracial marriage that I believe extends beyond, if my memory is correct, beyond black-white, and also queer couples as well, which is something that was a limitation of my father's
interviews. He only interviewed people who identified as cisgender, straight couples. Okay. And I'm going to have to sign books very quickly. I usually stay for like 2 hours chatting and everything, but I have to catch a flight tonight, so thanks for understanding. Sorry. So sorry. I do know someone in Seattle.
Earlier.